The emergency room clock read 2:47 a.m. when Sarah Chen heard the motorcycle engine die in the parking lot. She was alone at the nurse's station, the fluorescent lights humming their lonely song above her head. The hospital was quieter than it had been all night, that eerie 3 a. lull when even the desperately sick seemed to hold their breath. Her shift had started 16 hours ago. It would end in 4 more, if she was lucky. If no one coded, if no ambulances screamed into the bay with trauma she couldn't turn away. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's feet ached. Her back screamed. Her eyes burned from staring at charts and monitors for so long that the words had started to blur together. She'd lost count of how many IVs she'd started, how many hands she'd held, how many times she'd smiled reassuringly while her own heart cracked a little more. But she was still standing, still working, still fighting. Through the glass doors of the ER entrance, she could see him, a figure in black leather, slumped over his handlebars like a man who'd used his last ounce of strength just to arrive. Steam rose from the bike's engine, mixing with the December frost that clung to everything. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across fresh snow that had fallen throughout the night, turning the world into something cold and unforgiving. He wasn't moving. Sarah's training kicked in before conscious thought. She grabbed her coat thin, worn at the elbows, but all she could afford, and pushed through the automatic doors. The cold hit her like a physical blow, cutting through her scrubs, stealing her breath. The temperature had dropped to single digits. The kind of cold that killed. The rider lifted his head slowly, the movement painful and deliberate. His face was blue-gray beneath a salt and pepper beard crusted with ice. Frost crystals clung to his eyebrows, his eyelashes. His lips had taken on that telltale purple hue that made Sarah's medical instincts scream danger. His hands, still death-gripping the handlebars, shook violently, not the normal shiver of someone who'd been cold for a while, but the deep, uncontrollable tremors of severe hypothermia. "Sir." Sarah's voice cut through the night air, professional but warm. "Sir, you need to come inside. Right now." He shook his head, a gesture so small she almost missed it. His teeth chattered too hard for words to form. Ice cracked and fell from his beard with the movement. Sarah moved closer, her nurse's assessment running automatically. Probable hypothermia, stage 2 or 3. Confusion, impaired judgment, risk of cardiac arrest. She'd seen hypothermia before, knew how quickly it could turn fatal. "Please," she said, her voice softer now, the tone she used with frightened patience. "You're hypothermic. I'm a nurse. Let me help you." Up close, she could see more. The Iron Hawks MC patch on his jacket. The way his lips tried to form words but couldn't. The desperation in his eyes not from the cold, but from something deeper. Something that had driven him to ride through a blizzard when any sane person would have found shelter. He was dying in front of her, and he was still trying to go somewhere else. What Sarah didn't know couldn't have known was that this man had ridden 200 miles through whiteout conditions to reach his dying brother at a hospital 3 blocks away. What she couldn't have imagined was that by dawn, his entire brotherhood would arrive to repay a debt she hadn't realized she was owed. But that came later. First came the coffee. At 32 years old, Sarah Chen looked 40. Maybe older on the bad days, and lately, they were all bad days. 3 double shifts this week alone. Her scrubs faded navy blue. The cheap kind that never quite fit right hung loose on a frame that had forgotten what regular meals felt like. She'd lost 15 pounds in the past 6 months, not from any intentional diet, but from the simple mathematics of working so many hours that food became an afterthought. Dark circles carved deep shadows beneath her almond-shaped eyes, making her look perpetually exhausted, which wasn't far from the truth. Her black hair, once thick and glossy, now pulled back in a bun so tight it gave her headaches. She couldn't remember the last time she'd worn it down, the last time she'd looked in a mirror and seen something other than a tired stranger staring back. Sarah was an ER nurse at County Memorial Hospital, the kind of hospital that served the forgotten parts of the city. The place where bullet wounds came in on Saturday nights and insurance questions came never. Where overdoses arrived by the dozens. Where domestic violence victims showed up with stories that never quite matched their injuries. Where the poor and the desperate came because they had nowhere else to go. It wasn't the gleaming hospital she'd imagined during nursing school. There were no cutting-edge facilities here, no research wings or private rooms with views. County Memorial was survival medicine, triage in hallways. Patients doubled up in rooms meant for one. Nurses stretched so thin they sometimes forgot to eat, to breathe, to remember why they'd chosen this brutal, beautiful profession in the first place. The pay was terrible. The hours were worse. The emotional toll was something Sarah had stopped trying to calculate. Her apartment, a cramped studio in a building where the heat worked sporadically and the neighbors fought loudly at all hours, sat empty most days. She paid $1,100 a month for 400 square feet of loneliness, and even that was a stretch on her salary. Her furniture consisted of a futon that doubled as bed and couch, a small table with one chair, and a dresser she'd found on the curb. No TV, no decorations. Just a space to sleep between shifts. Her social life had died somewhere between nursing school and her third year on the night shift. Friends had stopped inviting her to things when she'd canceled for the 100th time. Her last relationship had ended 6 months ago. With 8 words she still heard in quiet moments. "I can't compete with a hospital, Sarah." David had been a good man, patient, understanding. Until he wasn't. He was right, though. He couldn't compete. No one could. Because Sarah had made a choice a long time ago, maybe before she even realized she was making it. She'd chosen the patients, the strangers, the broken and bleeding who came through those ER doors with nothing but pain and hope that someone would care enough to save them. And Sarah always cared. Sometimes she thought that was her problem. She cared too much, felt too deeply, carried too much of other people's pain home with her in the hours when she should have been sleeping. But she didn't know how to stop. Tonight, this morning, technically had been typical for County Memorial. A car accident victim at 11 p.m., 2 teenagers with stab wounds at midnight, an elderly woman with chest pain at 1 a.m., and a steady stream of minor injuries, illnesses, and crises that blurred together into an endless march of need. Sarah had held hands, started IVs, administered medications, cleaned wounds, comforted crying children and terrified adults. She'd smiled reassuringly, even when her own heart cracked a little more with each story, each tragedy, each life hanging in the balance. By 2:30 a.m., the ER had finally quieted. Dr. Patel had gone to catch a nap in the on-call room. The other night, nurse, Maria, had taken a bathroom break that Sarah knew would stretch to 10 minutes of sitting in a stall with her eyes closed, stealing rest wherever she could find it. Sarah had allowed herself one luxury, one small comfort to get through the final hours of her shift. On the nurse's station counter sat a paper cup of coffee. Not the hospital's burnt sludge that tasted like regret and overtime. Real coffee, good coffee. She'd spent her last $3 at the bodega down the street before her shift, splurging on the good stuff, a dark roast that actually smelled like coffee instead of desperation. It was cooling now, probably not even hot anymore, but it was hers. Her reward for surviving another impossible shift. Her fuel for the final push toward dawn. She'd been looking forward to that coffee for hours. Marcus Ghost Reeves, the road-worn warrior. The man slumped over the Harley-Davidson was named Marcus Reeves, though most people called him Ghost. He'd earned the name 20 years ago in the Iron Hawks Motorcycle Club, back when he was younger and faster, and the kind of rider who seemed to disappear into the wind itself. Now, at 53, the name felt prophetic for different reasons. He felt like a ghost of the man he used to be, haunted by roads traveled and brothers buried. Ghost's face told stories even when his mouth stayed shut. Weathered and lined, tanned from decades under the sun, marked by a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a reminder of a bad accident in his 20s. His beard, once dark brown, had gone salt and pepper years ago, now crusted with ice that made him look ancient. His eyes, when they weren't half frozen shut, were a startling gray-blue, the kind that seemed to look through you rather than at you. He stood 6'2", but the cold had him hunched over his bike like an old man. His leather jacket black, worn smooth in places, covered in patches that told the story of 30 years with the Iron Hawks, was soaked through. Underneath, his flannel shirt clung to his skin, equally useless against the cold. His jeans were stiff with ice. His boots, good leather but not meant for this kind of weather, had long since lost the battle against the snow. He'd been riding for 6 hours straight through the worst blizzard Illinois had seen in a decade. The call had come at 8 p.m. His younger brother, Daniel, had been in a car accident. Critical condition. Street Luke's hospital, 200 miles away. The doctors weren't sure he'd make it through the night. Daniel, his baby brother, the one who'd gone straight, gotten married, had kids, lived the kind of life their mother had dreamed of. The one who'd looked at Ghost's choices, the club, the road, the refusal to settle, with a mixture of confusion and quiet disapproval. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since their mother's funeral, where words had been said that couldn't be taken back. Where family fractures had finally split into canyons too wide to cross. But Daniel was dying, and whatever had broken between them, whatever words still hung in the air like smoke, none of it mattered. Not now. Not when time was running out. So, Ghost had climbed on his bike at 8:15 p.m., with snow already falling and the weatherman screaming about staying off the roads. He'd pointed his Harley north and twisted the throttle, leaving behind the safety of the clubhouse, the advice of his brothers who'd told him to wait until morning. The common sense that said this was suicide. The first hour hadn't been too bad. Snow, but manageable. The second hour got worse. By the third hour, Ghost could barely see 10 feet ahead. The highway had disappeared under white, and he'd been navigating by instinct and stubbornness alone. By hour 4, he'd stopped feeling his hands. By hour 5, his decision-making had started to slip, a symptom of hypothermia he was too far gone to recognize. He'd passed 3 other hospitals on the way. His rational mind had screamed at him to stop, to warm up, to save himself. But Ghost had kept riding. Because Street Luke's was where Daniel was, and nothing else mattered. Except now, 3 blocks from his destination, his body had finally given out. The Harley had sputtered, coughed, died. Ghost's hands could barely grip the bars anymore. His thoughts were slow, muddy, like trying to think through water. He knew, somewhere in the part of his brain that still functioned, that he was in serious trouble. But he'd also seen the lights. County Memorial Hospital. Emergency room. It wasn't Street Luke's. It wasn't where Daniel was. But it was shelter. It was warmth. It was maybe his last chance. Ghost had managed to guide his coasting bike into the parking lot before momentum died completely. Then he'd slumped forward, using the last of his strength to keep himself upright, and felt the cold trying to finish what the ride had started. He'd been about to give up, to let himself slide off the bike and onto the frozen pavement when the doors had opened. And an angel in scrubs had walked into the cold to save him. "I need you to come inside now," Sarah said again, her voice firmer. She'd closed the distance between them, standing close enough to steady him if he started to fall. Ghost tried to speak, but his jaw wouldn't cooperate. The cold had seized his muscles, turned his body into something foreign and unresponsive. He managed to shake his head again, a pathetic gesture that took enormous effort. "My brother." The words came out slurred, barely intelligible. "Street Luke's?" Sarah's eyes widened. Street Luke's was 3 blocks north. This man had been trying to get there, had pushed himself to the edge of death to reach someone who needed him. "Okay," she said, her voice calm and soothing despite the urgency screaming through her medical training. "Okay, I understand. But right now, you need help. You're hypothermic. If you don't warm up, you won't make it to your brother at all. Do you understand?" Something in her tone cut through the fog. Ghost's eyes focused on her face, young, exhausted, but filled with a fierce determination that reminded him of warriors he'd known. Nurses were warriors, he realized. They just fought different battles. He nodded. Once? Small. Good. Can you stand? He tried. His legs buckled immediately. Sarah caught him, her small frame somehow supporting his weight as his body threatened to collapse. She was stronger than she looked, or desperation made her strong. Ghost wasn't sure which. Together, moving in an awkward shuffle, they made it through the sliding glass doors and into the blessed warmth of the ER. The heat hit Ghost like a wall. His body, starved for warmth, wanted to surrender immediately to it. But Sarah kept him moving, kept him upright, guiding him toward a chair in the waiting area. Maria, Sarah called out. I need blankets and a thermometer. Now. The other nurse appeared from somewhere, took one look at Ghost, and disappeared again with the efficient speed of someone who'd seen this before. Sarah helped Ghost out of his frozen jacket, her hands clinical but gentle. The leather was stiff, resistant. Ice cracked and fell to the floor. What's your name? She asked, kneeling in front of him, checking his pulse with fingers pressed against his wrist. Marcus, he managed. Ghost. They call me Ghost. Okay, Ghost. I'm Sarah. I'm going to take care of you. Maria returned with an armful of heated blankets and a digital thermometer. Together, the two nurses worked with practiced coordination. Blankets wrapped around Ghost's shoulders and torso. The thermometer tucked under his tongue. When it beeped, Sarah's face went pale. 92.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Moderate to severe hypothermia. Another hour on that bike, maybe less, and he would have died. We need to start active rewarming, Sarah said to Maria. Get me? I know, Maria interrupted, already moving. Warm IV fluids, heating pads, hot packs. I'm on it. Sarah turned back to Ghost. His shivering had intensified now that he was warming up, a good sign, actually. It meant his body was still fighting. Your brother, Ghost said through chattering teeth. Need to. Call him. Street Luke's, Daniel Reeves. Please. Sarah pulled out her phone. What's your number? I'll call and let them know. You're here. That you're okay. Ghost recited it from memory. The one thing his frozen brain could still grasp. Sarah dialed, identified herself as a nurse, explained the situation. Ghost watched her face as she listened to whoever was on the other end. Her expression tightened, softened. She glanced at him with something that looked like grief. I understand, she said quietly. Thank you. She ended the call and knelt beside him again. Ghost, your brother is in surgery. He was in a car accident. I know, Ghost interrupted. That's why I came. The surgery started 2 hours ago. They said it's going to be several more hours. He's critical, but he's fighting. Ghost's eyes closed. His hands, wrapped in blankets, clenched into fists. I have to get there. You will, Sarah promised. But not like this. Not hypothermic and barely conscious. You won't help him if you die trying to reach him. The logic cut through. Ghost nodded, defeated and relieved in equal measure. Let me get you warm and stable, Sarah continued. Then I'll personally drive you to Street Luke's myself if I have to. Okay? Ghost looked at her, this small, exhausted nurse who'd come out into the freezing night to save a stranger. Who was making promises she probably didn't have the authority to make. Who was looking at him like he mattered. Okay, he whispered. Maria returned with supplies. An IV stand. Bags of warm saline. Heating pads. She and Sarah worked together, starting an IV in Ghost's arm with an efficiency that spoke of thousands of similar procedures. Warm fluids began flowing into his system. Heating pads were positioned carefully against his core. And then Sarah disappeared. She returned 2 minutes later carrying a paper cup. Steam rose from it in delicate wisps. Here, she said, pressing it into his hands, helping him close his fingers around the warmth. Drink this slowly. Not too fast or you'll burn your mouth. Ghost looked down at the cup. Coffee. Real coffee. The smell alone was enough to make him want to weep. This is, he started. It's just coffee, Sarah said with a small smile. But it's warm, and it's yours. What she didn't say, what she'd never tell him, was that it had been her coffee. Her last $3. Her only comfort in an impossible shift. She'd given it to him without hesitation, without even thinking about it. Ghost raised the cup to his lips with shaking hands and took a sip. The warmth spread through him like liquid salvation. It was perfect. It was life. "Thank you," he said, and the words carried more weight than she could possibly understand. Sarah smiled. Tired, genuine, beautiful. "You're welcome. Now drink up and let us finish warming you up. You've got a brother to get to." Over the next hour, Ghost slowly came back to life. The violent shivering subsided as his core temperature climbed. Color returned to his face. His hands, though still stiff, began to obey his commands again. The heated blankets and warm IV fluids did their work, pulling him back from the edge he'd been teetering on. Sarah checked on him constantly between her other duties. A patient with chest pain needed attention. A child with a fever needed comfort. But every few minutes, she'd circle back to Ghost, checking his temperature, adjusting his blankets, making sure he was okay. "You don't have to keep checking on me," Ghost said during one of her visits. "I'm sure you've got plenty of other patients." "I do," Sarah admitted. "But you're my patient too, and you scared me out there. I don't usually find hypothermic bikers in my parking lot." "Not your usual ER crowd?" "Oh, we get everyone," Sarah said with a wry smile. "Gang members and grandmothers, rich and poor, but frozen bikers trying to reach their dying brothers? That's a new one." Ghost studied her face. The exhaustion etched there, the compassion that hadn't dimmed despite obvious fatigue. "How long have you been on shift?" he asked. 18 hours, Sarah admitted, glancing at the clock. It was 4:15 a.m., started at 10 yesterday morning. "I'll be done at 6 if we don't get slammed." "That's inhumane." Sarah laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Welcome to County Memorial. We're always understaffed, always overwhelmed, always doing the best we can with what we have." "They should pay you more." "They should pay us at all," Sarah corrected. "But we don't do it for the money." "Why do you do it?" The question hung between them for a moment. Sarah looked away, toward the ER entrance where ambulances would inevitably bring more broken bodies and desperate situations. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "Because on my worst days, I still get to save lives. And on my best days, I get to watch miracles happen." She looked back at him, like watching a frozen biker come back from the edge. "That's pretty miraculous." Ghost felt something crack in his chest. Not pain, something else. Recognition, maybe, or respect for a warrior who fought battles she'd never get medals for. "Your brother's lucky to have you riding through a blizzard to reach him," Sarah said softly. Ghost's expression darkened. "We haven't spoken in 3 years. He probably doesn't want me there. But you came anyway. Family is family. Even when it's broken." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. "The people we love hurt us the most. Doesn't mean we stop loving them." Before Ghost could respond, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. "What?" Ghost asked, alarm rising. "Your brother's out of surgery," Sarah said, her voice careful. They've moved him to ICU. They're saying the next 48 hours are critical." Ghost was on his feet immediately, the blankets falling away. "I need to go. Now." "Ghost, I'm fine," he interrupted, though his legs wobbled slightly. "My temperature's up. I'm stable. I need to be there." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, clearly weighing medical caution against human need. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, let me check you out officially, make sure you're stable enough to leave." "And I meant what I said. I'll drive you. You've been working for 18 hours. You can't." "I absolutely can," Sarah said firmly. "Besides, your bike isn't going anywhere in this weather, and you're in no condition to ride. So, unless you want to walk 3 blocks in single-digit weather, right after recovering from hypothermia, you'll accept the ride." Ghost couldn't help it. He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." 20 minutes later, after Sarah had cleared him medically and signed off on his discharge papers, they were in her car, a beat-up Honda Civic that had seen better decades. The heater barely worked, and the passenger seat had a spring that poked through the fabric, but it ran. The drive to Street Luke's took 7 minutes. You didn't have to do this, Ghost said, as Sarah pulled into the hospital parking lot. I know, Sarah replied, but I wanted to. Besides, I need to know if he makes it. Call me nosy, but I'm invested now. Ghost pulled a card from his wallet with stiff fingers. His club card with a phone number printed on it. Call this number, he said. In a few days, I'll let you know how he's doing. Sarah took the card, studying it. Ironhawks MC, a phone number, and below it, one word, brotherhood. I will, she promised. They sat in silence for a moment, the engine idling, snow beginning to fall again. Thank you, Ghost said finally, for everything. The warmth, the coffee, the ride, the giving a damn. Not everyone would have come out into the cold for a stranger. Sarah's eyes glistened slightly. Any decent person would have. You'd be surprised, Ghost said darkly. The world's not as kind as you think. Maybe, Sarah admitted. But I'd rather be the person who helps than the person who walks away. Even if it costs me. Ghost understood then that the coffee had been more than just coffee. That this woman had given him something she needed, something she'd been looking forward to without hesitation. The coffee was yours, wasn't it? He asked. Your last cup. Sarah's cheeks flushed. It was just coffee. No, Ghost said firmly. It wasn't, and I won't forget it. Before Sarah could respond, he climbed out of the car and headed toward the hospital entrance, moving carefully on legs that were still remembering how to work properly. Sarah watched him go, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her heart feeling strange and full in a way it hadn't felt in months. Then she put the car in reverse and headed back to County Memorial to finish her shift. She had no idea that she'd just set something in motion that would change everything. Ghost made it to the ICU at 5:03 a.m., nearly collapsing at the nurse's station. The ICU nurse, an older woman with kind eyes and 20 years of experience reading desperate family members, took one look at him and pointed him toward a room. Third door on the left. He's stable for now. But Mr. Reeves, visiting hours don't technically start until I rode 200 miles through a blizzard to get here, Ghost said quietly. I'm not waiting for visiting hours. The nurse nodded slowly. Third door on the left. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Daniel looked small in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping him tethered to life. His face was bruised and swollen from the accident. A ventilator breathed for him. Ghost stood in the doorway, frozen for reasons that had nothing to do with hypothermia. This was his little brother, the kid he'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager he'd protected from bullies, the young man who'd looked at Ghost's choices with disappointment and chosen a different path. 3 years of silence suddenly felt like a waste of time they didn't have. Ghost pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down heavily. He reached out and took Daniel's hand carefully, avoiding the IV lines. Hey, Danny, he said softly. It's me. I'm here. I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry for a lot of things. The machines beeped steadily. Daniel didn't respond. Ghost sat there in the harsh fluorescent light of the ICU and did something he hadn't done in years. He cried. At 5:47 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Jesse, his VP in the Ironhawks. How's your brother? Ghost wiped his eyes and typed back. Critical. Made it just in time. Almost didn't. What happened? Ghost's thumbs moved across the screen. Got caught in the storm. Hypothermia. Collapsed at County Memorial. Nurse saved my life. Gave me her last coffee and warmed me up. Then drove me here herself. A long pause. Then, her name? Sarah Chen. Night shift ER nurse. County Memorial. Another pause. Then, we remember Det's brother. Give us her info. Jessie, she was just doing her job. She went above and beyond for one of ours. That's not just a job. That's hard. Give us everything you know about her. Ghost hesitated, then typed out what he remembered. Sarah's full name, County Memorial Hospital. ER nurse. Night shift. Got it, Jesse replied. You focus on your brother. We'll handle the rest. Handle what? Ghost typed, but Jesse had already gone. Ghost stared at his phone, a mixture of gratitude and worry swirling in his gut. He knew his brothers, knew how they operated. When the Iron Hawks decided to repay a debt, they didn't do it halfway. He just hoped Sarah was ready for what was coming. At the Iron Hawks clubhouse, a converted warehouse on the south side of the city, Jesse Reaper Martinez put down his phone and looked around the room. It was 6 a.m., technically early, but bikers kept strange hours. About 20 members were scattered around the main room, some nursing coffee, others working on bikes, a few just waking up from sleeping on the couches. Brothers. Jesse called out. Listen up. The room went quiet. When the VP spoke, you listened. Ghost brother is critical at Street Luke's. Ghost almost died getting there, got caught in the storm, went hypothermic. But a nurse at County Memorial saved him. Brought him inside, warmed him up, gave him her last coffee, then drove him to street. Luke's herself after working an 18-hour shift. Murmurs rippled through the room. We're going to find out everything about this nurse, Jesse continued. And we're going to make sure she knows the Iron Hawks take care of people who take care of us. What's her name? Someone called out. Sarah Chen, ER, nurse at County Memorial. Night shift. One of the younger members, Tyler Tech Morrison, already had his laptop out. On it, over the next 2 hours, as dawn broke over the city and the snow finally stopped falling, the Iron Hawks went to work. Tech found Sarah's basic information within minutes. Social media was sparse. She barely had time to live. Her life, much less documented online. But he found enough. Age, education history, address. Then he dug deeper, accessing public records through methods that weren't strictly legal but weren't traceable either. What he found made his jaw clench. Jesse, Tech called out. You need to see this. The VP came over and looked at the laptop screen. His expression darkened. Shit, Jesse breathed. Sarah Chen, it turned out, was drowning. Student loans, $87,000 from nursing school. Monthly payment, $340, which she'd missed twice in the past 6 months. Credit card debt, $12,000, mostly medical expenses from when she'd gotten sick last year, and her insurance hadn't covered everything. Rent, $1,100 monthly for a studio apartment in a building with code violations and a landlord known for harassment. Car repairs, a recent $800 bill that had maxed out her last remaining credit card. Her bank account currently held $127. She worked 3 shifts a week at County Memorial. Overtime whenever she could get it. Her paychecks, after taxes and automatic debt payments, left her with barely enough to eat. She's working herself to death, Tech said quietly. And she gave Ghost her last coffee. She probably couldn't afford another one. Jesse's hands curled into fists. Keep digging, I want to know everything. Her bills, her landlord, her hospital, everything. By 9 a.m., they had a complete picture. By 10 a.m., Jesse had made a series of phone calls. By noon, the plan was in motion. The thing about motorcycle clubs is they're not isolated entities. They're part of a network, a brotherhood that extends across state lines and club colors. When one club decides to honor someone, word spreads fast. Jesse made his first call to the president of the Devil's Disciples, a club 40 miles south. Marcus, he said when the call connected. It's Reaper. I've got a situation. Talk to me, Jesse explained. Ghost's ride. Sarah's kindness. The debt they owed. We're planning something, Jesse said. But I wanted to let you know in case any of your brothers want to roll with us. When and where? Marcus asked immediately. Dawn. County Memorial ER. We're going to let this nurse know she's got a family now. We'll be there, Marcus promised. How many are you thinking? As many as want to come. This is optional, but it's important. I'll spread the word. Expect the disciples. Jesse made 7 more calls. Road warriors. Steel riders. Thunder Kings, Wind Walkers, Knights of the Highway, Lone Eagles, Iron Brotherhood. Each president heard the story. Each one committed. By 3 p.m., word had spread through the biker community like wildfire. Not just locally, across the state, across neighboring states, a nurse had saved one of theirs. Without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. She'd given her last comfort to a frozen stranger and then driven him 20 minutes out of her way after an 18-hour shift. That kind of kindness? That was sacred. By 6 p.m., the texts were flooding in. Iron Hawks, 47 riders, Devil's Disciples, 38 riders. Road Warriors, 52 riders, Steel Riders, 37 riders. Thunder Kings, 31 riders, and more. So many more. Jesse stared at his phone in disbelief. We're at 200 and counting. By midnight, they'd hit 300 confirmed riders. By 2 a.m., preparations were complete. At 4:30 a.m., as Sarah Chen started what she thought would be another normal night shift at County Memorial, 300 motorcycles began converging on the city, and by dawn, everything would change. Sarah's Thursday night shift started like any other. She arrived at County Memorial at 6 p.m., changed into her scrubs, tied her hair back, and prepared herself for another 12 hours of chaos. Maybe longer if they were short-staffed, which they usually were. The ER was already busy. A teenager with a broken arm from skateboarding, an elderly man with pneumonia, a woman in labor who'd mistakenly come to the ER instead of obstetrics. The usual organized chaos. Sarah moved through it with practiced efficiency, her mind automatically triaging, assessing, treating. Start an IV here. Administer medication there. Hold a frightened child's hand while the doctor set a fracture. Comfort a crying mother. Clean a wound. Check vitals. Repeat. She was good at her job. Maybe too good. Her ability to compartmentalize, to set aside her own exhaustion and pain, made her indispensable. It also made her a target for more shifts, more responsibilities, more patients than one person should handle. By 2 a.m., the ER had quieted slightly. Sarah allowed herself a 15-minute break, collapsing into a chair in the break room with a cup of terrible hospital coffee. She thought about the biker from earlier in the week. Ghost. She'd called the number on his card yesterday, left a voicemail asking about his brother. No response yet. She hoped Daniel had made it. Hope Ghost was okay. Hope that night in the parking lot had meant something more than just another patient saved and forgotten. Her phone buzzed. A text from her landlord. Rent is late. Need payment by end of week or starting eviction proceedings. Sarah's stomach dropped. Her rent wasn't late. It was due tomorrow. She had 3 days. But her landlord, Mr. Peterson, was notorious for harassing tenants, especially the ones he knew were struggling. She typed back, "Rent is due on the 1st. Today is the 28th. I have 3 days." His response was immediate. "Lease says rent due by the 28th. Check your contract." Sarah's hands shook as she pulled up her lease on her phone. She'd signed it a year ago, desperate for any apartment she could afford. She'd read it. She was sure she'd read it. But now, looking at the fine print, payment due by the 28th of each month. She'd been wrong, she'd misremembered, and she didn't have the money. Not until her paycheck cleared tomorrow. By then, Peterson would have already filed eviction paperwork. She knew how he operated. Sarah's chest tightened. She couldn't breathe properly. Panic clawed at her throat. She was going to lose her apartment. After everything she'd sacrificed, all the double shifts and skipped meals and utter exhaustion, she was going to end up homeless because she'd misread a date on a lease. The break room door opened. Maria stuck her head in. "Sarah? You okay?" Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired." Maria didn't look convinced, but the ER didn't allow time for deep conversations. "We've got a car accident victim coming in. ETA 3 minutes. Sarah stood, shoving her phone into her pocket. Personal crisis would have to wait. Someone needed saving. That's what she did. She saved everyone else while her own life fell apart. At 4:45 a.m., The first motorcycles arrived at County Memorial's parking lot. Jesse, Reaper, Martinez led the Iron Hawks contingent 47 strong, riding in tight formation. They pulled into the lot slowly, respectfully, engines rumbling low. Not the aggressive roar meant to intimidate, but the steady purr of machines handled with care. They parked in neat rows at the far end of the lot, away from the ER entrance. Didn't want to block ambulances or emergency access. Didn't want to scare patients. By 5 a.m., the Devil's Disciples arrived. Then the Road Warriors, Steel Riders, Thunder Kings. More and more, until the parking lot looked like a convention of chrome and leather. 300 riders, representing 15 different clubs from 4 different states. They'd come for one reason: to honor a nurse who'd saved one of theirs. Jesse stood in the center of the gathering, his breath fogging in the cold dawn air. Around him, club presidents and officers clustered, discussing final details. "Everyone clear on the plan?" Jesse asked. Nods all around. "We wait until shift change," Jesse continued. "That's at 6 a.m. We don't want to disrupt the ER or scare patients. When Sarah comes out, we show her respect. No aggression, no intimidation. We're here to honor her, not frighten her." "What if she doesn't come out?" someone asked. "She will," Jesse said with confidence he didn't quite feel. "Nurses always leave at shift change. They're too exhausted to stay longer than they have to." At 5:30 a.m., Tech approached with his laptop. "Did one more dig," he said to Jesse. "Sarah's landlord filed eviction paperwork yesterday. Technically premature, but he's counting on her not knowing her rights. She's going to come out of that ER thinking she's losing her home." Jesse's jaw clenched. "That changes things. Do we have the landlord's information?" "Everything. Name, address, phone number, history of tenant harassment." "Want me to?" "Not yet," Jesse interrupted. "First, we take care of Sarah. Then we have a conversation with Mr. Peterson." By 5:50 a.m., the sun was beginning to lighten the eastern sky. The snow from earlier in the week had melted, leaving the parking lot wet and glistening. 300 bikers stood in formation, organized by club, waiting. Inside the ER, Sarah had no idea what was waiting for her. At 6:02 a.m., Sarah Chen pushed through the ER's sliding glass doors and stepped into the cold morning air. She was dead on her feet. Another 12-hour shift. Actually 14, because they'd gotten slammed at the end and Maria had needed help. Sarah never said no. Her entire body ached. Her head pounded from dehydration and exhaustion. Her feet felt like they were walking on broken glass. And in a few days, she'd probably be homeless. Sarah pulled her thin coat tighter and headed toward the employee parking lot at the side of the building. That's when she heard it. The rumble started low, almost subsonic. A vibration she felt in her chest before she heard it with her ears. Then it grew. A rolling thunder of engines firing up in perfect synchronization. Sarah froze, confusion cutting through her exhaustion. She looked toward the main parking lot and her breath caught. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. No, not dozens. Hundreds. They filled the lot like a metal forest, chrome catching the early morning light, leather-clad riders standing beside their machines. And they were all looking at her. Sarah's heart hammered. Fear spiked through her veins. What was happening? Was this some kind of gang thing? Was the hospital under attack? She took a step backward, toward the safety of the ER. That's when one man stepped forward from the crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an Iron Hawks MC patch. "Sarah Chen?" he called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot. Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "Yes?" The man walked toward her slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. As he got closer, she could see his face weathered, serious, but not unkind. "My name is Jesse Martinez," he said. "I'm the vice president of the Iron Hawks MC. A few nights ago, you saved one of our brothers, Marcus Ghost Reeves." Sarah's brain struggled to very due. Process. Ghost. The hypothermic biker she'd pulled in from the cold. The one she'd given her coffee to. The one she'd driven to street. "Luke's. Is he okay?" Is his brother. Daniel made it, Jesse said, and a small smile crossed his face. Touch and go for a while, but he's going to recover. Thanks in part to Ghost being there when he woke up. And Ghost was only alive to be there because you saved him. I was just doing my job, Sarah said automatically. No, Jesse said firmly. You went above and beyond your job. You came out into the freezing cold to help a stranger. You gave him your last coffee, the one you'd been saving for yourself. You warmed him up, stabilized him, and then drove him to another hospital after working an 18-hour shift. That's not a job, Sarah. That's heart. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She was too tired for this, too overwhelmed. I don't understand, she whispered. Why are all these people here? Jesse's smile widened. Because in the biker world, we take care of our own, and we never forget a debt. You helped one of ours. That makes you one of ours now, whether you wear a patch or not. He gestured back toward the sea of motorcycles. These are brothers and sisters from 15 different clubs across 4 states. They rode through the night to get here, because when we heard what you did, every single one of them wanted to be here to say thank you. As if on cue, 300 engines revved. Not aggressively. Almost. Ceremonially. The sound washed over Sarah like a wave, and suddenly she understood. This wasn't a threat. This was tribute. Jesse stepped aside, and Sarah saw them clearly now. Rows upon rows of bikers, men and women of all ages, all wearing different club colors, all standing in perfect formation. And then, as one, they removed their helmets. 300 faces revealed. 300 humans showing respect. Sarah's knees went weak. Jesse caught her elbow gently. We wanted you to know, he said, softly, that you're not alone. That kindness matters. That the world sees you, Sarah Chen, and we're grateful. From the back of the formation, someone started a slow clap. It spread through the crowd. 300 bikers applauding her for saving Ghost, for being kind, for doing what she'd always done, helping people, even when it cost her. Sarah's tears fell freely now. She couldn't stop them. We also did some research, Jesse continued, his voice gentle. We know you're struggling. Student loans, medical debt, a landlord who's harassing you. Sarah's eyes widened. How did you? We're very thorough, Jesse said with a slight smile. And we'd like to help, if you'll let us. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and held it out to her. What is this? Sarah asked, not taking it. Open it. With shaking hands, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside were multiple documents. The first one made her stop breathing. Student loan account, balance. $0 PAID in full. No, Sarah whispered. No, that's not. You can't. We can. Jesse said. And we did. 15 clubs pooled resources. Your student loans are gone, Sarah. All of them. Sarah flipped to the next document. Credit card account, balance. $0, paid in full. Your medical debt too, Jesse said. The next document was a bank statement. Her bank statement. Except the balance was wrong. Current balance. $15,000. That's for emergencies, Jesse explained. For peace of mind. So, you never have to choose between eating and paying rent. Sarah was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. I can't accept this. It's too much. I just gave him coffee. You gave him more than coffee, Jesse said gently. You gave him dignity. You saw a human being in need, and you helped, without hesitation, without judgment. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How many places had turned Ghost away that night before he got to you? Sarah shook her head mutely. 7, Jesse said. 7 other hospitals, gas stations, and businesses. All of them saw a biker and closed their doors. But you came out into the cold and brought him inside. You're the reason he's alive. The reason he was there when his brother woke up. The reason 2 brothers are getting a second chance to fix what was broken between them. He pressed the envelope into her hands firmly. This isn't charity, Sarah. This is family taking care of family. And you're family now. Behind him, the 300 bikers raised their right fists in unison. A salute. A promise. A vow. Sarah looked out at them through her tears, this army of leather and chrome. This brotherhood that had crossed state lines to honor a nurse who'd given a cup of coffee to a stranger. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll accept it," Jesse said. "Say you'll let us give back even a fraction of what you gave us." Sarah looked down at the envelope in her hands. Freedom. Security. The chance to breathe for the first time in years. She thought about all the patients she'd saved, all the hands she'd held, all the lives she'd fought for while her own life fell apart. Maybe it was okay to let someone fight for her for once. "Okay," she whispered. "Thank you." The parking lot erupted in cheers and the revving of engines. 300 bikers celebrating a nurse who'd finally been seen, finally been valued, finally been told that she mattered. Jesse smiled. "There's one more thing." He gestured, and a biker from the Road Warriors came forward carrying a leather jacket. Not just any jacket, a custom piece, beautifully made, with patches from all 15 clubs represented that morning. On the back, in carefully stitched letters, County Memorial ER, protected by Brotherhood, St. 2024. "This hospital is under our protection now," Jesse said, as he helped Sarah into the jacket. It fit perfectly, warm and heavy with meaning. Any patient who needs help, any staff member who needs support, any threat to this place or the dumber come. People who work here, they'll have to go through us. Sarah ran her fingers over the patches, overwhelmed. "Why? Why would you do all this?" Jesse's expression softened. "Because you showed us that good people still exist. That kindness isn't dead. That even when you're exhausted and broke and running on empty, you still chose to help. That's the kind of person worth protecting." He stepped back and addressed the crowd. "Brothers and sisters, I present to you Sarah Chen, honorary member of the Brotherhood, protected, valued. Family." 300 voices responded in unison. Family. And as the sun rose fully over County Memorial Hospital, Sarah Chen stood surrounded by 300 bikers who'd ridden through the night to tell her one simple truth. She was not alone. She never would be again. 6 months after that December morning, County Memorial Emergency Room looked different. The waiting room had been renovated with donations from motorcycle clubs across the region. New chairs, better lighting, a children's play area, even a small coffee station that always seemed to be stocked, though no one was quite sure who kept filling it. The staff had grown too. 3 new nurses hired, better pay negotiated, schedules that didn't destroy lives. And painted on the wall behind the nurses' station, where every patient and staff member could see it, a mural of a motorcycle, with the words "Brotherhood begins with kindness" underneath. Sarah Chen still worked at County Memorial, still pulled night shifts when needed, but now she did it by choice, not desperation. Her student loans, gone. Her medical debt, erased. Her rent, paid in full for the next 2 years after 15 motorcycle clubs had a conversation with Mr. Peterson about tenant harassment. He'd suddenly become very accommodating and had even fixed the heat in her building. But more than the financial relief, Sarah had gained something she'd been missing for years: community. Every week, members of different clubs stopped by the ER, not for treatment, but to volunteer. They'd help with translations for Spanish-speaking patients, escort worried family members to different departments, sit with elderly patients who had no one, bring food for staff during long shifts. The bikers had become part of County Memorial's fabric, and the hospital was better for it. On a warm June evening, Sarah stood in the employee parking lot, about to head home after a regular 8-hour shift. 8 hours, still strange and wonderful, when she heard a familiar rumble. Ghost pulled up on his Harley, Daniel riding behind him. Both men had healed. Daniel from his injuries, Ghost from the hypothermia and the emotional distance. They'd spent the past 6 months rebuilding their relationship, and Sarah had watched from a distance as 2 broken brothers became family again. "Hey, Sarah," Ghost called out, killing the engine. Daniel climbed off first, walking over with a broad smile. "Finally get to meet the woman who saved my stubborn brother's life." Sarah laughed. He was pretty stubborn, tried to refuse treatment. "Sounds like Ghost," Daniel said. then pulled her into a gentle hug. "Thank you for everything." Ghost approached more slowly, a small paper bag in his hands. "Brought you something," he said gruffly, handing it over. Sarah opened it and laughed. Inside was a bag of premium coffee beans. "The good stuff. To replace the cup you gave me," Ghost said. "Figured I owed you." "You didn't owe me anything," Sarah said softly. "But thank you." Ghost shook his head. "I owed you everything. And thanks to you, I got my brother back. Got a second chance I didn't deserve." "Everyone deserves second chances," Sarah said. Daniel clapped his brother on the shoulder. "That's what Sarah keeps telling him. Maybe eventually he'll believe it." They stood together in the parking lot as the sun set, three people whose lives had intersected on one freezing night and had been forever changed by it. "You changed the world, you know," Ghost said quietly. The Brotherhood started a program. Hospital Protection Initiative. 23 hospitals across 5 states are now under club protection. All because you showed us that good people still exist in places we'd forgotten to look. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I was just being human." "Exactly," Ghost said. "And sometimes that's the most radical thing you can be." As the brothers rode away and Sarah climbed into her car, newly repaired, courtesy of the Steel Riders mechanic shop, she thought about that December night. How close Ghost had come to dying. How close she'd come to walking past, to pretending she hadn't heard the engine die, to choosing safety over compassion. One cup of coffee, one act of kindness, and the world had answered back with an army. Sarah started her car and headed home, not to a dingy studio she could barely afford, but to a small one-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood, where the heat always worked and the landlord didn't harass her. She was still a nurse, still worked too hard, still cared too much. But now, she wasn't fighting alone. Now, she had family, and sometimes, on quiet mornings when the ER was calm and the coffee was brewing, Sarah would look at the mural on the wall and smile. Brotherhood begins with kindness, and kindness, once given, has a way of coming home. Sometimes the smallest act, a warm cup of coffee on a freezing night, can ripple outward until it shakes the very ground beneath us. Sarah Chen didn't set out to change the world. She just saw someone who needed help and chose not to look away. And in that choice, she reminded 300 bikers, 15 motorcycle clubs, and eventually thousands of people across the country of one simple truth. Kindness matters. It matters when you're exhausted, when you're broke, when you have nothing left to give. It matters. Especially then, because those are the moments that define us. Sarah gave her last cup of coffee to a frozen stranger, and the Brotherhood gave her back her life. But more than that, they gave her something money can't buy. Proof that good things still happen to good people. That compassion isn't weakness. That one person really can make a difference. So, here's the question we're left with. If kindness could summon 300 engines for Sarah, what might it summon for you? Be kind, even when it costs you, even when it's hard, even when you're running on empty, because you never know who's watching. You never know whose life you might save. You never know what you might set in motion with one simple act of human decency. The world is watching, and it remembers. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that compassion is never wasted. And if you'd like to hear more untold stories of ordinary people sparking extraordinary moments, subscribe and join the brotherhood of those who still believe in the power of kindness. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.